Woke, woke. There are so many things going on around. You must take heed. It's been written and prophesied about, so you must believe. Not everything that glitters is gold. Pay attention as it's been told. Join us every Friday, 7 p.m. Eastern, with Brother Yusuf as he tackles and breaks down current events, current news, and politics, and the Islamic Ummah. Please join us, streaming on all major platforms. Channel Sunnahfollowers.
2030 agenda, but then there was a couple things that I really wanted to cover. As you're going to see why, as I'm going to highlight this week, some of the familiar faces and personalities that we've blasted here and exposed and buried, you can say, not literally, but figuratively here, are going to be covered tonight because they rear their ugly heads again, as they often do. We're going to go through some other interesting news here from America also as well. We're going to go back to feminism, talk about the very beautiful sarcasm there, Muslim Girl magazine, which I was unaware of this magazine until I saw the founder of this magazine was on the CNN top 25 Muslim list. We're going to cover that list also today as well. We're going to look at some of the people on the list and why you should not be surprised, obviously. And we're going to get into all that. The purpose of this magazine as it relates to what we talked about last week with the feminist agenda and the takeover. So we're going to start off with some obey the rulers news. I like to go there a lot recently, as you guys have been watching. So you have basically Kuwait. They stripped the nationality of a gentleman who goes by the name of Nabil al-Awadi. Now, what was this gentleman's crime? Was he a murderer? Because we're going to be talking later about how the United States government, particularly the Democratic Party, believes you should keep murderers in your country. But was this guy a murderer? No. Was he a thief? No. Did he blaspheme the messenger, the Quran, the Sunnah? No. What did he do? Well, he simply said that the response of the Arab governments towards their brothers in Palestine, the abandonment of them, was not basically, you could say, just or Islamic behavior. Now, I think that you put 10 Muslims against a wall and you ask them that same question, I think we'd probably get, there's always going to be one bad apple in the bunch, but I think overall we would get a pretty strong consensus that the response is an embarrassment, it is treasonous, it is an act of treachery. There's no other way of spinning this, and that's all this gentleman simply stated. He was a scholar, he was someone, he has prominence, well known, and this is what they can do over there. In America, we're going to see they don't even want to get rid of the illegal aliens who don't even have the citizenship. But in these countries, they can simply just strip your citizenship like that. They can simply imprison you like that for just simply stating the facts that 9 out of 10 Muslims safely would agree with. So this campaign is not just limited to him. Kuwait has done this. Some estimates 35,000, some as high as 42,000 since March. As of March of 2025, so a month ago. They've done this. Again, some of these people are politically motivated, criticizing the regime. Others basically are some agreements that go way, way back in terms of who should be or should not be granted Kuwait nationality. Some of these surrounding Bedouin groups, if you will. I remember hearing about this controversy when I lived in the Gulf many years ago. But let's get to one of these statements that he made here. And I just want to compare this rhetoric here to what you see coming out of the left and these Muslim apologists in our countries. This gentleman stayed off by saying, this is, of course, for those who obtain citizenship illegally or they threaten national security. So simply stating that your response to our brothers and sisters in Palestine was not just, threatens their national security. So that's what he's basically stating. He goes on. He described the campaign as a national effort, and I quote, to restore Kuwait to its rightful people, clean, of all impurities. Now, could you imagine if that language was used by any Western nation? Could you imagine if someone in the United States said we need to clean America of all the impurities? Do you know what kind of racial stuff would be invoked by the left? They call this white supremacy. They would attack it from the beginning of the day to the end of the day for months on in. You never even hear about it 5 years from now. If England or France just simply states they don't want the illegal, phony asylum seekers in their country, you never hear the end of it from the Arab media, from the international media, from the local media. But this guy can say language like this, and no one is even going to notice this. No one is even going to care. So at the end of the day, they can say as much fiery, inflammatory rhetoric as their heart desires, and they're never going to be called out for it. Not by their national media, obviously, you'd be stripped of your citizenship, put in jail. Not by the Muslim media, because they're a bunch of cowards, the ones in the West. And of course, not by the Zionist-controlled media of CNN, Fox News. None of them are going to say this. That language is only reserved for the Western nations who simply want to secure their borders and maintain their culture. But this guy can say he wants to remove all the impurities from the society. And this is, you say Hitler-esque Nazi language, being used here. And again, for someone like myself, it's not surprising. And if you guys have been watching me for the past few months or half a year, it also should not be surprising. Knowing who these people are, what they represent. We went over the Asim Hakim stuff a few weeks ago, where we covered the Arab supremacy and showed this ideology, how it permeates throughout the region, how these countries are some of the most racist, intolerant, nations on earth, but yet they never get called out, for it. So that's something I want to open up with, just to see, again, there are good brothers in these countries who are speaking out. And this is what happens to them. All the things I did here on Palestine, they'd have put me in jail and cut my head off by now if I lived in those countries. That 9-hour series that I did where I exposed the international violations, I exposed the progression of the takeover of that part of the world. And if I would have done something like that, I would have got through the first video. And they simply would have taken me and took me out. So now we turn domestically speaking. I wasn't going to cover this, but this thing just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And now the Muslims have involved themselves in this. Some of our familiar friends I highlighted in the opening. So you have this gentleman that goes by the name of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. You cannot watch, particularly the leftist media outlets like MSNBC and CNN, without someone talking about this guy. They go on and on and on about this guy. He's a victim. He's unjust. This evil regime. In fact, they're trying to use this guy to say they could do that to you or I. We're going to see in a minute how much rubbish that is, but that's how they're trying to frame it. If you don't stand up for this innocent man, as they like to call it, then sooner or later, Donald Trump is going to start rounding up American citizens and doing the same thing. So we hear the usual language. He was a husband, a father. He was unlawfully deported unfairly. Now, they even went as far as to call him a Maryland father. He was a Maryland husband. I mean, you got to love the language, of the left, here. He's a Maryland father. I'm born and raised in North Carolina, spent my life in North Carolina, South Carolina. And no one ever called me a North Carolina dad. I'm a North Carolina father. I'm a North Carolina husband. I'm a South Carolina. Again, when you start hearing the left and you get familiar with them using language like this, the guy is guilty of sin, and they're trying to humanize him. So again, we're going to get down to the facts tonight, and you're going to see that the reality is, as usual, quite different. So you hear, bring him home. This is one of the chants. It was even tweeting in National the other day. It was the main thing on Twitter. Bring him home, hashtag. I was honestly surprised, basically, that I didn't see our usual, initially at least, left-wing Muslim friends doing this. I was expecting to see this, and I was looking for it, as I always do. Then I visited our friend Butch Ware, who I talked about at length a few months ago, the one that was chosen by Jill Stein, who was welcomed in with open arms in the masjids, and the Peace Sheikhs put their arms around this guy and posed for selfies with him. And we exposed what he stood for. Well, I went and I said, okay, well, I know Butch is on this. I know he's basically promoting this stuff to the Ummah who still unfortunately follow him. And exactly, he was doing that. He was defending this guy. He was parroting the language of the left, as I expected him to do. He was implying that Mr. Nayib Bukele of El Salvador didn't want to return this deported individual because it would expose his torture camp of a prison. So long story short of the intro, before we get into more of the facts, was that this guy was rounded up. We're going to talk about why in a minute. And he was sent out. And now it's hands across America from the left to return this guy, even though he is not a United States citizen. He was sent home. That's his home country, not America. He is not an American citizen. And they're criticizing Mr. Bukele for his prison camps. Now, I've mentioned Mr. Bukele several times on this platform. This man has transformed his society like that. He took El Salvador from a crime-ridden hellhole to one of the safest nations in this hemisphere. How? How did he do this? It's simple. He got tough on crime. He started rounding up and dealing harshly with these gang members, particularly MS-13. The left can't stand him. He took a country where women and children could not go to the parks without fear of stray bullets and being raped. They would just rape the women on the streets in front of their husbands in these places. I've read these accounts for years. No one had a problem with that, but you round up the people who are doing it, all of a sudden the left is there. And they're telling you this man is evil. I'm not all for this man. I'll share some stuff about him in a minute, his stance on Palestine in particular. But when it comes to this area, we always have to look at something as a total, as a whole. He has done a lot of good things. Now, he's not all the way. He's not a brother, so to speak, but he has done his part. Now, Mr. Bukele said when speaking about people like Mr. Ware, he said in a famous quote, I'm paraphrasing here, you talk about human rights, but never the rights of the children to play in a park without getting harmed, the right of people to walk safely down the street. It's always about the rights of these people whose entire existence destroys the rights of others. This is a paraphrase quote from Mr. Bukele that he was talking about with these gang members. No one ever hears about the woman who has to now cry her eyes out every night because her child was shot or her daughter was viciously gang raped. We don't ever hear about her right not to have that done to her. All we ever hear is they show these images like we are supposed to feel sorry for these people. Now, again, Mr. Bukele, as I mentioned, he's not without fault. His paternal grandparents were Palestinian Christians, but he is a Zionist supporter. He has welcomed the Zionists with open arms. He's not on our side in any means in this issue, but at least he's on the way. Maybe, Allah felt that I can change his heart. But as of right now, when it comes to crime, he is very good. So back to Mr. Ware. So I guess Islam now is a religion of criminal rights in the minds of people who follow this man, because he's pasting these pictures of gang members who under Sharia, we wouldn't even imprison them. We would simply execute them. Imprisoning these people is too kind. There's no benefit in keeping them alive. None whatsoever. These are people who sold cocaine, who sell heroin, who take all this stuff and destroy and rape these communities. We have nothing we owe to them. But if you listen to Mr. Ware, this is a human rights issue. We're going to cover his style of dress here in a minute. So these people have this kind of, you could say, raw hatred. I'm talking about Mr. Ware and the people who follow him for white Americans that literally blinds them to justice. I'd like to ask these people, especially Mr. Ware, would you enroll your children in an area where MS-13 is controlling that area? I'd like to ask them if they move in their neighborhood. I guarantee you, if you look at where this guy lives, it's probably a gated community. He's not living in these areas. He's not sending his kids to these schools, but yet he's sitting here on his pulpit telling us they basically are something we should sympathize with, we should show love for. This is some kind of human rights, issue. And again, they view the world through a lens that anything bad for whites, particularly white Americans in this context, is good for everyone else. Do you, again, think any wealthy Muslim nation would tolerate people like Kilmar Albrego Garcia? What would Kuwait do? As we just talked about earlier, you even criticize the way they're handling Palestine. They strip you of your nationality, detain you, all these things. You think Kuwait, you think Saudi, you think any Muslim nation of that GCC area in North Africa would tolerate MS-13, but yet the West is supposed to. The West is supposed to bend over backwards for these people. No sane society, again, would value or respect any rights of a gang like MS-13. But Mr. Ware, again, like this type of ilk, they can't help themselves. Now, again, I wouldn't even mention this guy's name anymore. I already covered him. If it wasn't for the fact that, unfortunately, we have prominent Muslims supporting and endorsing this man. When he speaks, like I said, he's welcome in the masjids. They put their arm around him. They take pictures with him. They put him on their Facebooks and their Instagrams. They're so proud to be seen with this man. Now he's running for the governor of California. So he had him with Jill Stein. They're taking money and donations by saying free Palestine. The Muslims, oh, Allah Akbar, mashallah, free Palestine, give him money. He's going to fix things. And they don't go and read the platform, LGBTQ, criminal rights, blah, 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 all the way down, climate agenda, all that usual leftist stuff. So again, more fiercely now, he's going to promote this angle. Because where's he running for governor? California. What is California? It's a majority sanctuary state, obviously. These people are welcome with open arms. The more gangs you're in, the better it is in California. If you show an MS-13 on the arm, they'll say, yeah, come on in, buddy. Here's free house. Here's some free money. Here's free health care. You want to go to college, we'll pay for that too. And the California taxpayer is fleeing. It's out of control. So he wants to pander to them because that's what he is. He's a businessman. He is someone, he's a racist and a businessman who now sees a demographic that he can pander to. Because there's no sane individual, again, that would support a position of keeping people like Abrego Garcia in this nation. We're going to go through him again. So once a Muslim, again, recognizes and accepts this cancerous left-wing ideology, I covered it with feminism, I've covered it at length here. They are so far gone from Islam that they really shouldn't even be called Muslim anymore at this point. They're Muslim only in name only, because every single tenet of leftist ideology is completely blasphemous. It's completely antithetical to everything Islam stands for. But yet we still see the Muslims in the masjids going after them. Now I want to cover that right here before we move back on to the criminal that they are defending. So I want to look at a report that I had read this week when I was preparing for this, because I've always talked about, and I went through this in Feminism last week, about the mental health component of liberalism. That people who embrace this ideology more times than not have a mental health issue. So let's take a look again at some research that Pew Research Facility has done on March 19th to March 25th, 2020. The study focused on the percentages of people who have been informed by a healthcare provider that they actually had a mental health issue. 38% of white Americans who describe themselves as very liberal were told you have mental health issues. 38%, 4 in 10, basically. If you look at non-whites, that demographic still split up to cross division, obviously, whites, non-whites. It's 20% have a mental health issue if you're far left. If you just describe yourself as a standard liberal, 26.4% of those whites were told they had a mental health issue versus 15.9% of non-whites. Moderates, 19.5 versus 14.8. But if you look at people with traditional backgrounds in this study, you will see that it's literally exactly even. 14.8 to 14.8 of white versus non-white people who define themselves as conservatives. So it's basically barely above 1 in 10 has a mental health issue. Now, again, because if you're a white Caucasian person in the United States and you subscribe to left-wing ideology, you're nuts. I mean, more than 40% of the time, because you listen to these people telling you how evil you are, that you're blessed with privilege, your purpose is to be racist and hold other people down, and you clap and you cheer them on. And you say, yeah, he hates us, great job. I mean, you have to be mentally ill to subscribe to such an ideology. If you're non-white, you're hearing that stuff, you've got to be slightly mentally ill or just racist to have that much hatred and animosity to a large group of people who's done nothing wrong. And then also you add in the anti-Islamic component, again, the abortion, the massive murder of babies, the transgendered agenda that now a man with a wig, and I can put lipstick on right now and tell you guys I identify as a woman, and I should be able to go to the women's bathroom, and the leftists will go, yeah, send him in there. I mean, it's like, that's how insane it is. I could go out here with my beard, mashallah, put on some lipstick, God forbid, and a wig, and walk into a bathroom and say, no, I feel like I'm a woman today. And I should be able to go in there with your daughter in the bathroom. And a leftist would go, yeah, that's his rights. You have to be nuts to support this. And people like Butch Ware have more openly done that. So again, mental deficiency is the only way. You've got to have something in you internally that just isn't right to embrace this ideology. You're there to disagree with law and order, destroy your culture, destroy morals, and just the physical destruction of your society. Even if the illegals, as I've said before, were the best people on earth, you can't take in 1 million plus people and pay for everything for them and not expect some kind of, issues with your finances. It's just simply not going to happen. So back to the guy that they're doing all this for, who we're supposed to love and want to go down there and embrace. He just hired a lawyer, basically named Simon Sandoval Moshenberg. Two guesses there on what the ethnic origins of that gentleman are. And again, this guy is illegal. He is a citizen of El Salvador. So let's look at him. Was he outstanding? We keep hearing about what a great husband he was. Well, he had a restraining order placed on him because he had violently assaulted his wife on multiple occasions. We have the statements of the woman saying these things. I mean, she basically got a restraining order, protective order against this man. So we keep hearing Maryland husband, Maryland father, the one with the restraining order, the one that was basically involved in domestic violence on multiple occasions. He was seen frequently dressed in the culture of South American gangs. Now, one of the things that, MS-13 is known for, if you tell anyone in El Salvador, is the Chicago Bulls cap. This is a symbol of the MS-13 gang in South America, Central America. And, again, they were telling us, well, he was a fan of the Bulls, Well, anyone who knows anything about sports, the Bulls haven't been very good in quite some time, since the days of Michael Jordan. He lived most of his life, from what we're told, as an illegal, at least in this country, in Maryland. So, I mean, needless to say, I don't think that excuse fits when you also hear that it matches. You also see the tattoos that he had on, which also are indicative of MS-13. So it's just tick, 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 tick. Now, he was stopped transporting 8 illegal immigrants in a sanctuary state in 2022. So he was engaged in human trafficking of illegals. He was arrested, and then, of course, it's a sanctuary state. So illegals are basically, I don't want to use this in a loose term, they're like God to the left. They're not capable of making any mistake. You can't punish them. Even if they're involved in a crime, he's illegal, you got to bow down, prostrate, and welcome them. This is how California's been treating them for decades. Now, when he was arrested, did they find a Bible? Did they find a Quran? Did they find a religious holy book? No. They found rolls of cash, rolled up, They found drugs. And guess what? He was there when he was arrested with 2 other guys. Guess who they were? Known members of MS-13. 2 judges even found this man as being directly involved and in high standing with MS-13. So this is, again, rolls of cash, drugs, tattoos, outfits that are synonymous with the culture. You find him hanging out with 2 members of MS-13. I got a lot of contacts from work. I don't have any MS-13 members on there. It's pretty not something that's easy to do. But yet he was arrested with 2 other members with drugs and money. I mean, just tick, 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 tick. The left said initially this was a lie, and it's all been exposed, as everything else the left says. He is a piece of human trash. He offered nothing to this country. His place should be executed or in a cage, where he cannot contribute any more to the destruction of society. And we even had Democrat politicians now trying to go and visit him with taxpayer-funded trips, like Mr. Chris Van Hollen. He had attempted to go down there. He wanted to meet this guy. He was unable to meet him. He wanted to assure him that we're fighting for him here. We're, trying to get his release. And again, imagine voting for this. Going back to our mental health, imagine you invest mental energy in a party who does this, who goes down there. I've talked about the Muslim stance on voting, before. We don't have a dog in the fight, so to speak. But again, this is, taxpayer money being spent to bring back an MS-13 gang member. He continues to use the language upstanding Maryland man. They keep using that again to cover up the fact that he was illegal, ignoring judicial statements showing he was a gang member. Again, this guy should be tried, for treason, because he's literally actively promoting and contributing to the misery of American citizens. Every drug that guy sold in this country is on his deeds on the day of resurrection. Every pregnant woman who may have a birth defect, that child has to live with that, is on him. All the sins that this man committed, now this politician is taking them on him again at the end. And again, he's home. All week it was bring him home. He's home. He is where he belongs, in the cage, and where should be executed. And again, people like Butch Ware, as I talked about how to spot them, they're as transparent, as a glass window. I mean, they're easy to see through. They're going to continue to do this. I mean, that's why I went right to his Instagram because I knew he was going to, endorse this and expose this individual. And, again, so that was that. That's been sweeping the news this week. I wanted to touch on it because I wasn't going to mention it. It's just another case of the Democrats supporting criminals. Nothing new. Move along. Nothing to see. But as usual, these Muslims who affect us and our children who listen to these people are now sticking their nose in this again, making this guy like a hero, blindly following the leftist talking points. So now back to what I talked about in the opening, the feminism angle that I came across again this week. And we often hear, from our sheikhs and even myself and people in social media that the kuffar society is dying. And yes, it is, justifiably so. But you rarely hear them telling the truth that the Muslim society is also dying, except for a few small fraction of us. And again, the vast majority of Muslims are. As we talked about, Allah has a plan. Allah is in control. So following up, I learned there's this magazine called Muslim Girl Magazine. I was not aware. Obviously, I'm not a reader. I'm not a subscriber. I doubt I would gain any benefit, from really outside of presenting this information to you brothers and sisters tonight, that I would get any benefit at all outside of knowing what they're up to, of reading this magazine. So again, the founder of this magazine is a woman who goes by the name of Amani Al-Khattabi, 32-year-old woman born of Palestinian parents and Jordanian parents. She's a Palestinian and Jordanian descent. This woman basically was listed by CNN. There you go. And that is a perfect photo, isn't it? It just kind of exposes it. Sister Layla, we'll talk about what Sister Layla did a presentation on a few weeks ago, and the kind of before I came on, I was hearing the end of it. It was very well done. When we talked about females and teaching and how to present yourself and how to act and those type of things. I'll touch on that here again in a second. But she was listed on CNN's 25 most influential Muslim American list. That is a great list to be on, isn't it? It's safe to say that in order to be on anything that CNN is considering positive, you must hate white people, embrace LGBTQ, reject traditional Islam, promote feminism. CNN would not honor anyone unless they ticked all those boxes. You've got to be, all those things. You got to be anti-white. You got to talk about how evil white men are. White men should be eradicated, like the Harvard professor said recently. You got to talk about how traditional Islam is passé. You got to use the language that Islam needs to be reformed. We need a reformed Islam. You'll hear that language. So again, CNN will not put you on such a list. This is like the equivalent, in my opinion, in my view, of being on the top list of the shaitan. I'm on the shaitan's most favorite list. I don't think that's a list here that, needless to say, anyone wants to present to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of judgment. Hey, I was on the CNN top 25 most influential Muslim list. Does that not count for anything? That's again like going and using the shaitan as a protector, on the day of judgment. I mean, it's a list, again, you've got to have done some pretty wretched things or promote wretched things to be on. Sister Layla will not make that CNN top 25 list. I would not ever make that top 25 list. Needless to say, I'd be the bottom 25 list if they ever did such thing about myself. So let's look at some of the personalities before we move on who made this list. And I think you'll start to see a pattern here. You've got basically Umar Suleiman was on the list, Mr. 25,000 or whatever it is that he charges. $25,000 to hear him speak. If you want any kind of private session, like if Sister Layla wanted to bring him on here, she can correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's $10,000 for him for an hour. Hamza Yusuf was on the list. Mr. Let's get the ecumenical movement together. Let's unify the Abrahamic religions. There's no difference in them. You have Hamza Yusuf, on the list. As you can see, these are some of the covers, here. We'll talk about some of the content and the deceptive nature of this in a little bit here. Suhaib Webb, one of my personal favorites, followed, unfortunately, I came to know of a few years ago. Mr. being on the cover of Playboy magazine for a sister is a halal activity. The guy who said, did you read the articles? You know, the sister did a great article in a magazine surrounded by that, or that thing, you know, you can say. He highlighted the beauty of the article, and it was halal for the sister to be on the cover of a magazine. We talked about that if you guys didn't hear it. Long story short, there was a Muslim girl who agreed to be on the cover of Playboy magazine for a interview, if you will, and they put her on the cover. And as any man knows, I mean, whether you've been involved in this or you know, obviously you've known people who have, if not yourself, people buy those magazines based who's on that cover. So if they see this girl on the cover, they think they're getting everything, needless to say, when they purchase that said magazine. So this Muslim girl, by being on there, is advertising sin, whether she's doing it or not. She's promoting it. And of course, to get to her interview, you've got to flip through all the pages to find all this stuff. And Suhaib Webb said this was halal, you know, it's his ruling, you know. So you found this beautiful woman here, such high class she is. Again, this is about slowly integrating us with the West, getting these ideas, because they don't care about you or I. They don't care about people in their late 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. No. They want your children. They want your teenagers. So young girls will say, well, this sister was in Playboy. Maybe I can do that one day. Maybe that's female empowerment. And it's, again, sending a very dangerous message. Ilhan Omar, one of my other personal favorites, of course, was on the list. This she married her brother to come into this country. She should be deported. She's a disgrace. LGBTQ, feminism, the whole usual. Hate white people, even though she's married to a white man. I covered with a white man. I covered that a few months ago, how it's always funny, these leftist women, they tell me how I'm evil and I'm the devil, but yet they're married to someone who looks like me. Maybe not as handsome as me, but they're married to someone who looks like me nonetheless. Keith Ellison was on the list, corrupt Democratic politician, need I say more. And then Linda Sarsour. If anyone knows Arabic, Sarsour means cockroach in Arabic. Linda Sarsour is a wretched human being, part of the feminist Islamic movement. She's one of the pioneers of modern day Islamic movement. She was on the list. There was a sister on, I'm going to call her a sister, a lady on there who was responsible for teaching dawah to people from Harvard University. And what dawah do you think they're teaching? The dawah of the messenger, Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, or a dawah that is inclusive? You know, again, I think you know the answer to that. So last week when I was talking about feminism, I went through the stats, the broken homes, I went through the divorce rates, the mental health issues, women basically not being attracted to the majority of men, the unrealistic expectations, and all those things, and how it was weaponized to get women to reject men, reject motherhood, embrace pornography. And ultimately, you embrace all those things. What are you doing? You're embracing the Quran, rejecting the Quran and the Sunnah. So there's another aspect of this feminism. This woman this week, the main creator of this magazine, she would tweet, "It's only one way. Divine femininity is a rejection of capitalistic automation. Toxic masculine power has destroyed Mother Earth." Now, is this a statement from a Muslim female? I would like to ask this preacher, do you know what capitalistic automation even means? I guarantee you, I would probably bet my salary for the next 2 months that she didn't even know what that means. She couldn't even articulate it. It's just buzzwords of the left to sound intelligent, to sound like you're in the know or whatever. But the key things here, the divine femininity. We're going to look at that in a minute. That's very peculiar, isn't it? Divine is reserved for who? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's only one divine. There's only one. There's no divine femininity. But again, this is the language she's using. And then she goes to toxic masculine power has destroyed Mother Earth. Again, you see paganism and anti-man being thrown in here to the statements. This is who this woman is. You know, so the gifts that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed the man with, to be strong, to be courageous, to be tough, is toxic. A man should put the lipstick on and put the wig on, like I talked earlier, and use the ladies' bathroom to be in touch with his divine feminine. A man should not be in the image that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made us. A man should not emulate the manners and behaviors of the Prophet ﷺ, all the other prophets of Islam, and the Sahaba. No. That is toxic masculinity. So again, when they are using Mother Earth, divine femininity, this is again language of the left. You can see all across the Western world, this is the case. We live in a gynocentric society, all the way through academia to Hollywood. I remember in college, I was studying the New Testament because I wanted to, again, be prepared for Dawah. I wanted to be strong in the New Testament. I wanted to be strong in the Old Testament, the Torah, particularly the Tanakh. I wanted to be able to know that so when I could really, engage with Christians about of course, the true message that we're behind. And the professor had dedicated an entire week worth of material to the students to show that Paul, the Apostle Paul is described in the Christian circles, was a feminist. And he didn't believe in women being in traditional roles. If you've read any of Paul's letters, you'll certainly see Paul did promote traditional feminine roles. Paul promoted the women to be in the back of the church. He promoted the women like we do. When you go to pray, you cover your hair, you dress modestly, you don't do anything to attract men. This is a place of worship, not a place to market sexuality. Paul's views there were indistinguishable from Islamic positions, but yet you saw this professor have to go out of his way to try to convince the Christians. Most obviously the class I was probably the only Muslim in there, was Christian, and they are hearing all of this stuff probably for the first time. When you watch any Hollywood film nowadays, you will see basically the lead person is a woman, skinny, 125 pounds, and she's beating men senseless. They do call it fantasy, don't they? But again, this is permeating all aspects of our culture. You see now, almost every movie that comes out is a female lead action star. The woman, again, is probably 110 to 125, and in the film, she's beating up the men. She's smarter than the men are dumb, they're subservient to her. It's like you can't even find a film now anymore to just sit down, and we should be investing our time in these things anyway. But if someone wants to waste a couple of hours of their life and watch a movie, you can't find it without having this gynocentric nonsense being promoted. And again, it's all aspects of the culture. They've taken it with a concept of divine feminine was basically about embracing all aspects of life, that there was a perfect female form which involved motherhood, nurturing, and all those things, and there was a perfect male form, which was the masculine, the protective, the courage, and all of these things. And they've turned this stuff into the worship of the female herself. I remember when I talked about one of the Saudi rulers, their guys they brought in, they paid all that money to entertain the Muslims. What was she singing about? She was singing about her private parts and herself being the inner mother goddess and how you should worship her. And you had women looking at her with admiration, and you had men looking at her with lust. And this is what our good rulers in Saudi Arabia spent a ton of money for. Again, the divine feminine. Now, is this stuff new to Islam? I would like to ask anyone to really think about that for a second. Have we had this before? Sounds familiar, doesn't it? If anyone is familiar with the Sirah, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. There were those, who are familiar with the Sirah, who would know Alat, Al-Uzza, and Manat. These were a triad of goddesses. Al-Uzza was an example, was known for her what? Protective nature. There was a temple in Petra. You had monuments erected all throughout Arabia. They were even referred to in blasphemous connotations as the daughters of Allah. People would venerate them, pray to them for fertility in their crops, in their livestock. Now we have Muslim women publishing magazines and tweeting rhetoric directly from Jahiliyyah. It's all circles, brothers and sisters. It all comes back. It's all circular. Everything Allah prepared us for in the Quran, a lot of people have told me over the years, don't you think that stuff's outdated? Don't you think those arguments don't work anymore? If Allah was so brilliant, why would he give you outdated arguments? How foolish they are. because those arguments and those situations, they're all circles. They all come back. The shaitan just repackages the same techniques. Allah gave us the psychology in the Quran to handle all of these situations, to be familiar with them, to recognize them. And they're all coming back. Again, we're going to look at another one as we close today as well, of the many guidances that we can find from the Prophet ﷺ, his life, his deeds, as well as the Quran. So again, CNN is one of the absolute worst of the worst in terms of credibility and morality. They employ open homosexuals, pedophiles, Zionists. You got black race baiters who their whole career is about keeping racism alive. You got all these just disgusting liberal, like Caucasian people I talked about earlier with their mental health, issues. It's just, again, is a disgusting place. Anything that they're endorsing should automatically be a, big red flag. And again, these are the so-called brothers and sisters who are winning awards and recognition from them. They are being a negative force in the Ummah. And it's basically, again, like I said, literally standing on the day of judgment and saying to Allah, hey, the shaitan has got my back. The shaitan is with me. CNN liked me. And CNN has done nothing. They've been caught lying countless times about generally everything. They're as close to fake news. Fox News on the other side is just as fake as CNN, but more to the right. But all of them, again, but CNN, one of the really worst. And we looked at last week all those depression statistics and all these things that these women get sucked into, and how harmful it is on their life. And for us to not say anything about this, to not warn, to not speak on it, we have to carry that. We're guilty. If we know we have to do something, if there's someone we know who's getting sucked in this, we have to do our best, because that's a good deed for the sake of Allah. Save a life, save a soul, save an existence. Here's best we can. And Allah, again, knows best. Who Allah wills to guide, there's none to unguide. And whoever Allah leaves to go astray, there is none that can guide them no matter what you say, but you try. You will get the reward and the good deed. So now we're going to look at some of the stuff that is found in there. So right from the beginning, when I started investigating and looking into this, I clicked on the website, and the first thing I saw was Muslim girl, women talk back. And I chuckled. Telltale, isn't it? Obviously, it's presented, kind of tongue-in-cheek with no seriousness. But those who are in the know, we know what this is called. It's a call for rebellion. It's a call for overthrowing the bondage, aka traditional roles. Women have a powerful voice. They are here to defy their male rulers. They are not to be told what to do by their fathers, by their husbands, and all of these things. And again, these women want to be men. Men, we're judged more strictly by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have more responsibilities. Every male is judged by how he governs his household, how well he provides for his wife and his children. Being a man is not easy, but you find these women are clamoring for the responsibilities of being a man. They want to be a man. They know best. And as we showed last week, do they really? Now, the magazine is very well presented, as I read several articles. They do mix a lot of Quran and Sunnah references, so it appears to be Islamic, because if they didn't do this, it would be too obvious. They have the poison behind, but they can't show you the skull and crossbones on. They got to flip the bottle around. And they got to put nice stuff on the front of the bottle so you'll go and you'll drink it. And then by the time you notice the poison on the back, you've already ingested it in you and it's too late. Again, as she's showing now, Sister Layla is showing, these women, again, they can't help themselves. Almost every picture is them selling their sexuality. They are openly selling their sexuality. They've got themselves in seductive poses. They've got themselves trying to be, in whatever way possible. Their lips are all puckered up. You see so much of this stuff as you go through some of the magazine covers in particular. And again, a real female sister who's righteous teacher, as Sister Layla covered last week, the week before, she's not speaking softly. She's not trying to sell sex. She's not selling sexuality. She's talking in a firm, respectful voice. That's how a female sister is to educate. She is to strip the sexual component. It's about the Quran and the Sunnah. It's about the deen. It's about being a good Muslim. It's not about these things. But again, you see these women, they can't help themselves. They have to sell this sexuality. And again, genius approach in the way they do it. Like one article I read in particular, we saw constant themes being promoted about career growth. And there was an article as an example where they were criticizing the Taliban because the Taliban had banned women's medical education. And I did my first presentation in 2023 in the masjid here with Sheikh Ibrahim sitting next to me. And one of the studies I had mentioned in that feminist presentation that I did way back then was about female fertility reductions in women who practiced in the medical field. If you go back last week, a lot of this is about population reduction. They want women in the workplace. They want women doing stressful jobs because they know nurses, as an example, are less fertile because of the long hours, the stress, and all of these things. Women are not made to be in these type of roles. This is made for us. The men are to be doing these things. The men are to be working 20-hour days. The men are to be standing guard in front of the city, ready to defend against invaders. Men are ready to go out on the hunt. Men are ready for these challenges. Women's bodies biologically are not made for this. And the Taliban recognizes that a woman should not be in these fields. This is not suitable Islamically for what a woman should be doing. You see this in the Kufar society, all these girls that are now playing sports and athletics. And you hear these women talk, they have voices like men because the testosterone levels, their hormones, because of the strength training and the conditioning, are making them more manly. They speak manly, they act manly, they talk manly, and of course they are not properly fertile anymore. They're losing their fertility with these activities. And again, this is why the Taliban is doing this. It is for the betterment of the society. They're doing something that they see suitable Islamically. And you find it's constantly in this magazine about careers and being a businesswoman. Again, there's nothing wrong in Islam about being a businesswoman. Khadija, was a businesswoman. But, again, to have a woman focusing entirely on her career, not on her children, not on her family, will wreck the society. And again, going back last week, we see the example in the Kufar society of, in fact, that they can't even have births anymore. They're at barely over 1 per 2 people, so you're seeing it again, just continuing to drop. And that's the agenda, that we're seeing here. So to close the chapter on that, you even have the women here not even wearing anything at all. It's again openly setting the stage to just increasingly shift women more and more to what the left desires, what the controllers want in this society. So now we are going to move on to another destructive aspect that I just saw this past week as well, and I felt that I had to cover it. Allah has a way, again, of humbling and educating people that the untrained eye necessarily will not see, initially. Others of us who, again, are in the know exactly what is going on. And again, Allah's wisdom always is revealed sometimes when you least expect it. We now have the erection in America of what they call the Statue of Union. This is a 90-foot statue built in the likeness of the Hindu god Hanuman. Hanuman is half monkey, half man. And this thing is 90 feet tall. It is in Texas. Now, there were cries. I can remember the Taliban days after September 11th. There were cries from all over social media, the beginnings of it at that time, news media, television, public. You had Christians, criticizing what the Taliban had done with the Buddha statues. And it's funny, that during the heart of that propaganda, they were showing over and over again the Taliban destroying these Buddha statues. The Christians were saying, oh, God, those Muslims, they're barbarians. They don't appreciate art. They're backwards. They're destroying culture. They're destroying all these things. These Muslims are such horrible, horrible people. But now we're seeing in social media you're having cries from the Christians daily on Twitter calling for them to tear this statue down. People talking about melt the statue down, save the resources. One guy said he wanted to personally do it himself. You had cries of not here, not now, not again, not ever. And there again, as you can see here in the video, this is in the United States of America. We now have Hanuman, a Hindu monkey god, 90 feet tall statue, just prominently displayed there. And now that the shoe is on the other foot, the Christians are seeing their culture being spit on or invaded. In the case of the Taliban, they had inherited a culture that had this in the past, and they wanted to remove traces of it for the future. In this case, the Christians have openly allowed the permits and everything to be built for this structure, and they're now criticizing again. So now that they aren't fine with these blasphemous Hindu statues being placed in their land, what happened again to loving culture and loving art? What happened to tolerance? That the Muslims are supposed to observe tolerance, for all of this stuff. But now that it's being done there and here, no, there's no tolerance, anymore. And this opens up, a no different section here, because there must be no place in our world for this level of blasphemy. There is no good that can be found from a Christian perspective, from a Muslim perspective, from a Jewish perspective in this religion here. I was watching a travel show just to kind of show, how absurd some of this stuff is. I was watching a travel show a few months ago. There was a Westerner who had stayed with a local man for his tour of India outside the Taj Mahal, area. And the local man was going to take this Western tourist, and he was going to show him what he did daily. The Western guy was all excited and happy about this. So in the morning, the local man said, okay, the first thing I do every morning is I go to feed my God. And yes, you heard that language correctly. He said, we're going to feed my God. And the God he was referring to, Hanuman, was represented by the monkeys in the park. So every morning he would gather his stuff and he would go and he'd feed the monkeys in the park. Now, during the feeding session that was going on, he had warned the Westerner, don't anger the monkeys or they would bite him. And the biting was a sign that God was angry with you. So if you fed the monkeys too much, they would get aggressive and they would start trying to bite you because they're just wanting to keep on eating. And basically that's a sign that God is angry, with you, and you need to, stop. And again, so God bites humans in the park for feeding him too much. No matter where you live, no matter what culture you've had, you are going to have a moment in time that is going to kind of slap you in the face, tap you in the head, and wake you up to your insanity. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you clue after clue of false ideologies and why they're false and what the truth is. That's why we say in Islam, every child is born a Muslim. Every child has an innate nature to basically worship and honor our Creator. It's only when you have man-made nonsense comes in do you cloud that child's judgment. So when you have stuff like this, that was your moment right there. Your God is biting you. You're feeding your God, in the morning. There was even like one where they were putting plates of food down for some plant because the plant was their God. Because when you don't have limits, you end up at this. This is where you come to. You're praying to monkeys. You see all sorts of peculiarities from this religion, more than any modern religion. You will see men and women in that country praying to the genitals of men. I've seen them praying to Donald Trump statues. This can easily be found on Google. You can type in on Google, Hindu man prays to Donald Trump, and you will see they made a Donald Trump statue, and they were praying to him. So somehow, I don't know the religious significance. I'm not that deeply connected to this religion, obviously. I've got better things to do with my time, but somehow Donald Trump ended up being a representation of one of these gods. a god of strength or something, perhaps. And you see them praying to Trump, they're praying to men's genitals, they're praying to elephants, they're praying to monkeys, they're praying to plants, they're praying to cows. They're doing all kinds of things because, again, once you open it up, it's hard to put it back in the box. And again, there was another one that I had seen as well. And it was a British gentleman was walking down the streets of a slum in Mumbai. And he passed by, it was like a red piece of plastic. And it was like clearly like a piece of plastic. It looked kind of like a children's toy of some kind. And it had been placed on there what looked like tape, like patches of squared, like aluminum foil, were like all around this plastic base. And as the British guy, the white guy, was like walking by, the Hindu gentleman was like telling him, hey, you can't come through here like that. You've got to purify yourself before you're in the presence of this holy entity. And the holy entity was a piece of plastic with tinfoil. And of course, they would say, oh, well, you're misrepresenting. You don't know the depth of this. But I do know that you're honoring and you're giving godhood status to a piece of plastic with tinfoil. I don't need to know the backstory to know that I don't respect, I don't honor this culture as a Muslim man. This is not something I want in my society. It's something we have to advocate against. This is the type of stuff people like Hamza Yusuf want to bring us in. That's why he's on the Shaitan's top 25 list that we talked about earlier, is to have us start having aluminum foil statues basically in public. And again, what was the first thing the Prophet ﷺ did when he entered Mecca? He went in the Kaaba and he found a lot of this Hindu stuff was in there. It was trying back during that time. The Kaaba was cleansed. So much today, a lot of Hindus claim that Islam is nothing more than Hinduism. I've heard these arguments. I'm very familiar with them. They say that the Kaaba was a Hindu temple and Muslims stole it. Instead of Muslims cleansing it, the Muslims stole it. So they even have this type of perspective that eventually they're going to reclaim, and I've heard this echo, this sentiment numerous times. So again, don't make an idol out of anything. It's idolatry on steroids. I mean, again, I said monkeys, elephants, cows, plastic tin with aluminum foil, on it, grass, it just goes on, and we can't tolerate it here. But I just wish that there was any Christians watching me. You guys, for once, would understand some of your hypocrisy. Because when this was on Muslim lands and we were cleansing it, you were calling us names. Now it's being done to you. It's not so funny anymore. Obviously, they have a little bit of anger, and they should. But they should also understand our anger when we purge this as well. So that was the topics I wanted to talk about, this week. As always, open time for questions and discussions. We had a pretty loaded week